I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik, and today we have a special podcast for you, recorded live at the 2025 American Diabetes Association Scientific Sessions in Chicago. The idea here is to share both some of the excitement of the sessions as well as some of the information discussed there. Here we go. Well, welcome everybody. It is an absolute pleasure to be here at the 85th ADA Scientific Sessions. That is 2025. For those of you who don't get a chance to listen to this until perhaps 2036, it'll still be relevant. I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik, Professor of Family and Community Medicine at the Sidney Kimmel Medical College of Thomas Jefferson University, and I am also the host of Diabetes Core Update, which is our clinician-facing, primary care and endocrine-facing podcast, as well, one of them. And also Diabetes Day by Day, which is our patient-facing podcast, two very different things. And we have everybody involved in podcasts from the ADA with us today, and I'm going to ask you each to go around to introduce yourself, where you're from, why you're doing like podcasts, what you get from it personally, but more importantly, what we hope to give our listeners, and maybe even something exciting from the last year. Alice, do you want to start first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. It's really exciting to be part of this live studio recording of this podcast, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm Dr. Alice Cheng. I'm an endocrinologist from the University of Toronto, and I have the pleasure of co-hosting with my partner here, Dr. Mike Rickles, Diabetes Care on Air podcast, which is a monthly podcast that is dedicated to the journal Diabetes Care. And within that podcast, we have the pleasure of interviewing one of the authors of a feature article. And then Mike and I do this we think it's a fun thing called Rapid Exchange, where we get to pick the 3 or 4 of the papers that we found particularly interesting and discuss them in greater detail. And then also we often have some corny fun fact that I usually like to add near the beginning, which then causes Mike to groan, pretending to laugh. So you can also tune in for that part. So it's been a real pleasure to be part of the podcast. I mean, I love being part of it because it keeps me up to date on the literature, because I got to take a look at the table of contents and make decisions about what we're going to talk about. So it's been very helpful for my own education. But I think also I learn a ton from Mike in terms of whatever Mike chooses to talk about. So for me, it's been great to be part of it.
And Alice, I think that really is one of the things we all learn, that we learn from each other. And one of the themes, I think, for our audience and a reason to tune in is the same way as we learn from each other. That becomes part of the group learning that you all become a part of. Mike?
Yeah, absolutely, Neil. And I not only learn about diabetes from Alice, but I've learned everything I know about podcast and presentation from Alice. And so it's really been a privilege and an honor for me to co-host Diabetes Care on Air alongside Alice. And one of the things to mention about, you asked why we like ADA and the scientific sessions, and in addition to being able to be here for a number of our trainees' presentations, colleagues' presentations, but also celebrating the achievement and recognition of our colleagues. And so our editor-in-chief of Diabetes Care, Stephen Kahn, recognized this year with the Banting Award and gave a spectacular lecture yesterday. And my co-host, Alice Cheng, the ADA's Outstanding Physician Clinician Award, bestowed today. So congratulations, Alice.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so because Alice usually catches me with a fun fact, so I've got a fun fact about Alice from her debate on Friday on GLP-1 agonists versus SGLT2 inhibitors, and Alice took the case for SGLT2 inhibitors, making the analogy of they're like a black dress. You can accessorize them with just about anything in the management of diabetes, and here we go.
And
Alice is proving the point and why she clearly won that debate.
Darlene, do you want to get it?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Darlene Sandoval. I am professor of pediatrics at University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus, and I am co-host of the Diabetes Bio podcast. Not that this is competitive, but we are the flagship journal of the ADA.
Whatever.
Oh, God. I thought, Darlene, I thought we said we were going to stay away from things like that.
Sorry. Couldn't help myself. So we interview authors of either the papers of the month or feature articles. Sometimes we just pick one we like, and we really we interview the corresponding author, but we hope that they will also include junior authors. So that's been it's been a really fun experience to see some of these junior scientists really kicking butt at the interviews and just being so articulate, and that's been really fun. I do want to highlight one. So Kevin will talk about another segment we have in the podcast that's a little less formal, but it actually highlights one of my favorite things in our episodes this past year, and that was we interviewed Julio Ayala from Vanderbilt University, Sean Burgess from UT Southwestern, and Marion Laughlin from NIDDK to celebrate the legacy of Dave Wasserman, who unfortunately passed away about a year ago. And it was he was a brilliant scientist and quite a character, and it was really fun to talk to them about his legacy and about their friendship, and that was a really special episode for me.
It really is beautiful. And Darlene, when I listen to what you and Michael just said, and it's so important to really point this out, that part of what we do is encourage that next generation, the younger clinician scientists. And what I find most astonishing, we're not that old, right? That we're doing that, and we barely... Kevin, your turn.
Barely out of diapers.
Do you want the age on a vote in the audience as to how old we are? Yeah, I'm Kevin Williams. I'm from UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas, Texas, and I kind of spearhead the Sweet Talk segment that occurs on the Diabetes Bio podcast. And I should mention Dave Wasserman. I knew him just for a very brief time towards the end of his life, maybe 5 to 7 years, but he was always so gracious, so generous with his time, and he's mentored so many people, not just within his own lab or within the institution, but outside, including myself. He was very generous to do Zoom meetings and discuss ideas, and he was really taken way too soon, and it's a shame. And he's also contributed through the mentorship so many rigorous scientists that are in the field, and they're at this meeting, they attend this meeting, they're very active, so it's a great legacy that he has.
Kevin, that's beautiful. I want to go back to, you mentioned you do the Sweet Talk segment, and it is a clever name, but what is it?
Yeah, so the Sweet Talk segment, we started off highlighting classic articles that were published in the journal, and so the journal's been around for quite some time, just like the society, and over the years it's quite common for investigators to start to forget the history of the field and where all of the hypotheses that you're coming up with were actually generated. And so we like to highlight those articles. If we can, we like to invite the authors of those articles onto the podcast and highlight the science, but also highlight the individual, get a little bit more of the conversation of what makes them tick, what brought them into the field, and what they think that where the field is headed in diabetes research, care, and treatment. And in addition to those articles, we highlight Pathway Award winners. So I don't know how many in the audience are aware that the American Diabetes Association has a huge funding mechanism for junior investigators, and it's really pivotal for them as they're transitioning out of their fellowship and going into their independent careers. It helps to stabilize them and promote their science. I believe that funding mechanism is about 5 to 7 years, so it's really a critical time in their development, and that mechanism, I believe, has been in place since about 2014 or so. And so since it's 5 or 7 years of funding, we're now getting to the point where some of those investigators have matriculated out of that, and we're interested to find out, okay, what was the success of the program? What did the American Diabetes Association fund? Where is that research now? Is it currently ongoing with additional ADA support or some other mechanism? But trying to see that progress. And more recently, we've been trying to do more of a living history of the society, as well as other investigators that are in diabetes research. So we've been highlighting, it's already been mentioned, Stephen Kahn, the Banting Award winner this year. We've had him on the program, I believe it was the last month's episode. We also had Shingo Kajimura, the current Outstanding Scientific Achievement Award winner. We had Barbara Kahn, which she was the recipient of the Albert Reynolds Award this year. We've had previous award winners for both the Outstanding Scientific Achievement Award and the Banting Award, including Philip Scher, Joel Elmquist. We've had some investigators that have been more in science communication, like Giles Yeo from the UK, really sharing insights into how you can research in diabetes, how you can research in obesity research, but also communication, which is really important in this time to try and get accurate information out of what's going on in scientific research. So it's been a real joy to run that.
It sounds like, and Kevin, I think I could guess, but can you also answer, and then Darlene, what you love about being here at Sci Sessions?
Yeah, I would like to echo a little bit what Mike Rickles said. You know, there's definitely, everyone needs to celebrate wins, and we talked about this on the podcast of celebrating a variety, whether it's in personal life or professional life, and we talk about in my lab as a basic science preclinical lab, trying to celebrate completions of projects, publishing, funding, but looking around this meeting, you can just see that it's a huge celebration. You can go to the oral sessions and you're celebrating multiple projects potentially being presented over many years and the progress of that lab or the individual. You go to the poster sessions and you're able to celebrate more commonly people that are just starting their careers in diabetes research, and you can really encourage them for long-term development and trying to progress in the research, care, and treatment of diabetes. But then also looking around the vendor hall, I mean, look at all of the medications and all of the treatments and therapies that have really come from the research that's been funded by the American Diabetes Association. It's been researched and presented here at this meeting in those oral sessions and the posters. It's just a huge celebration, and it's really nice to keep up to date with all of that information.
It really is. Darlene, I want to make sure I give you a chance to
Yeah.
say what you love about the Sci Sessions.
Yeah, so yesterday I gave a talk in a session, and the lady that spoke before me said it was her first ADA. And so when I got up there, I said, well, I've been coming to ADA since graduate school, and we don't need to guess on how many ADAs I've attended. But so I really, I came for the science and I stayed for the networking. So last night I got to have dinner with somebody that I did a postdoctoral fellowship with that I haven't seen in years.
Wow.
And it's just really cool to be able to connect with people in addition to talking about science.
It really is remarkable. And Kirk, I'll just throw in the what I love about the Sci Sessions, because you remind me of it, Darlene. And for me, the only experience that I've had that is this is when I was a kid going to summer camp. And, you create these relationships with people because you just have the chance to hang out with them, talk with them, learn about them, and just become close. But then at the end of the summer, you have to say, see you till next year. And then the beginning this summer comes again, and it's the same thing here. And you run into people you haven't seen in almost a year, and you hug them, and there's just this warmth that is unparalleled. For me, that's the only other experience I've had that is like that. Kevin, you have a thought, and then Kirk, I know you have things to say.
Yeah, and part of the joy of doing this podcast, as you mentioned it once a year coming to this meeting, but we get to kind of continue that celebration throughout the year and be able to highlight articles that are coming out in the journal, highlight different research projects and award winners in different aspects of the society on a monthly basis to keep that fresh and then return the next year.
Really good point. Kirk?
All right, so I'm Kirk Haubegger, and I'm from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I'm part of the Diabetes Bio Trio, and there's not much left to say anymore, is there?
Oh, gosh.
I mean, you guys have... No. So what I...
Last but not least.
Last but not least. What I really enjoy about our podcast is that, one, it forces me to expand into the greater realm of diabetes and not be so focused on our own interests. So we get to interview people that I just wouldn't run into, right? And I'm exposed to their type of diabetes research, which I probably wouldn't delve into, right? And so I really enjoy that. We've had some great insight into mentoring that I've tried to file away in the back of my brain and hopefully use to my advantage. And I think that the ADA scientific sessions encompasses a lot of those themes too, right? So it's great science, but it's really a chance to meet those friends and colleagues and then create new networks. And so this is a great opportunity, and I don't miss it.
That's wonderful. Alice, I saw you putting your microphone up like that. Were you just wanting to test if it works, or did you have something to say?
Well, you didn't ask me why I come to Sci Sessions.
Oh, I'm so sorry. One second. Wait. Alice? Why do you come to Sci Sessions? And don't say, funny you should ask.
Neil, funny you should ask. Everything you all said, but I'm going to add one more, which is karaoke night.
Oh, God. We're not doing that now, are we?
No, but I mean, that's an example of some of the fun that I think happens, right, at the Sci Sessions. Yes, well, we'll get to the science in a little bit, but it's the seeing people you haven't seen forever, and then there's usually at least one epic evening where things happen, and it's great fun, and pictures are taken and never shared, and that kind of stuff. So
I got a few of those pictures, Alice.
Yeah, you apparently did.
Yeah, I think those are filed away for a special moment.
But that's wonderful, and I think our listeners can have that sense of the enjoyment of having a shared purpose, of an enjoyment in partaking of the advances of science, and we'll come to that in a moment, and just the fun that you can have when you're hanging out with people, sometimes being serious, sometimes being silly. I love karaoke night and doing that together. Kirk, something that you said really strikes me, and that's when we can learn from people outside of our usual environment. And I think that is one of the advantages of all of our podcasts for our listeners, that all of our listeners come from different places. Some are clinicians, some are scientists, some are in rural areas, some are in big cities at academic centers. And when you can partake a bit of the fun, as you said, the silly way, Alice, you come up with something at the beginning of each one, but also share in the knowledge from so many different people, we all grow. And speaking of that growth, let's now go each in turn and share something that a session we went to, an idea we learned while here at the Sci Sessions this week, so that as a part of our growth, we share that with our listeners. Alice, do you want to go first?
So I was sitting here, and I've got two in my head. Am I allowed to?
Okay, as long as you don't take mine.
See, I'm looking at the studio audience. I think they're maybe agreeing.
Take two.
Okay. So the first one would be a session from this morning, and it was looking at bimagrumab, which I've learned how to pronounce, bimagrumab plus semaglutide. So this is a combination of a therapy that could potentially help build muscle, along with a GLP-1 receptor agonist we're very familiar with. So these were phase 2 data, about 500 some odd individuals, and they were all living with obesity, but not with diabetes. And what they were able to demonstrate, and I'll summarize, with the highest doses of the combination was nearly about 22% body weight loss. But what was impressive was that 93% of that was fat mass loss and only 7% lean mass, which is very different than any other modality for weight loss that we have. Now, these are very early data. Of course, there are potential side effects. There's a lot to figure out. But oh my gosh, that's exciting.
I have to admit that was actually one of my most exciting sessions to go to, because what we've talked about so often on all of our podcasts, I'm sure, is this Achilles heel of the current weight loss therapies, that people do lose muscle mass, and it is potentially a game changer. You said there were two, though.
But it's about insulin. I don't know, was yours about insulin?
I'll come up with something.
Okay. And I actually see Dr. Rich Bergenstahl in the back there, so I think it's appropriate that I mention this. So this is, it was from the Quint studies. And the Quint studies is a study of once-weekly basal insulin, specifically insulin efsitora. And I think it was Quint 1 that really, I thought, was novel and innovative. And it was a different way of dosing insulin in those living with type 2 diabetes who are naive to insulin in fixed dosing. So there was fixed dosing, 100 units, then it was 150 units 4 weeks later, then it was 250 units, and then 400 units, only if you needed to go up. and very different than how we've always done insulin therapy, and it was as effective as the usual way. And the hypoglycemia was actually a little bit less. Well, I should say not that. It was similar to the comparator, and in some cases looked like maybe a little bit less. So it was just, it made me think. It made me go, huh.
What I loved about that one was the simplicity that as a primary care doc, given the very high doses of insulin to start out with once weekly insulin, it can make you a little bit scared. And this makes it easy and algorithmic in a way that even someone like me can understand and do. Do you want to invite Richard up here for a second?
Just come say hi. Richard he's still got his mouth full almost. Okay, we give a big round of applause for Dr. Richard Birkenstall.
And again, come on up and maybe say a word or two, because we were saying earlier that one of the wonders of being here at Sci Sessions is both seeing friends, seeing mentors, and seeing scientists like yourself and learning from each other.
Yeah, well, thank you. Some of my favorite friends were here. I thought I'll stop by, but that's what I love about the sessions, is bumping into people, and I'm so glad to have that feeling of, oh gosh, it was crowded, and I bumped into people, and I couldn't get in that room, and some people complain I couldn't get in the room. To me, that's a good feeling, like, wow, there's so much interest. So anyway, and then, we didn't see that the last few years when things were, now it's sort of like it's back. I'm feeling really good, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Thank you, Rich.
Thanks, Rich.
All right, Michael, you're on.
All right, so I'm going to take the liberty from Alice to stretch the ask. And instead of one session, I'm going to call out a series of sessions that Holger Russ from University of Florida on the planning committee developed in the beta cell replacement therapies. And so not wanting to talk about the area that I'm interested in, but this being the area I'm interested in, that's where I spent most of the meeting. And what Holger did was this bench to bedside approach in a number of sessions. And so I'm going to call out just 3 of the final bedside results, because these were 3 first-in-human studies, small numbers, so not the hundreds of patients, but in mechanistic proof of concept of where the future may be with cell replacement therapies for diabetes. And in the first on Friday, ended with Hengqi Deng from Peking University in China, who's developed a chemical reprogramming method of generating inducible pluripotent stem cells that can then be differentiated into pancreatic islets, and has now in an individual with type 1 diabetes on immunosuppression achieved elimination of insulin with normal glycemia. So that's a really terrific advance in the generation of autologous stem cell derived islets. And then I had the privilege on Saturday of presenting the bedside talk with the results of the forward study from Vertex Pharmaceuticals that's reported on their treatment of 12 individuals with a full dose of their allogeneic stem cell derived islet products, Amilacel, that achieved elimination of insulin in 10 to 12 individuals followed over a year.
That is just so amazing. It's like living in future world. That one was covered, I believe, in the New York Times. Is that right?
Yeah, that was Saturday morning in the New York Times. There was an article about that study as well, and so but presented here at the American Diabetes Association, actually for the first time in an oral session Friday evening, the end of the day, and then expanded on in a symposium on Saturday. So that was so that's really exciting. But the individuals who were having also recurrent severe hypoglycemia prior to treatment, and that was abolished following therapy, but they all required initiation of immunosuppression. And so in the session this morning, the clinical talk came from Per-Ola Carlson from Uppsala University, where using technology developed at Sana, they're generating hypoimmune islets that now, using deceased donor islets as the source, we're able to genetically modify these islets to evade immune detection, at least a modest, not therapeutic dose, but could generate that in someone not receiving immunosuppression. With placement of these islets in the muscle, they could detect them surviving for up to 6 months. So again, early days, but big steps in where we hope the field is going to be headed in for the future.
Michael, I can actually hear our audience, which are actually not here. I mean the people out listening on Twitter and other social media going, oh my gosh, this is amazing. That really is. Thank you for sharing that, Darlene.
Yeah, so I'm going to cheat a little bit and call a shout out to Stephen Kahn's Banting lecture. Cheating just because we interviewed him last month, but I loved the organization of the talk. I love, the way it was organized in terms of the impact of his work on understanding beta cell function, and then the second half on beta cell mass, and also just the impact on the clinical research side and the basic science side, and just seeing the breadth of his impact on the field. I thought that was really cool. And the other thing that I want to give a shout out to is, we're having lots of conversations about GIP agonism and antagonism and its effects on weight loss. And there's a lot of literature out there about a particular area of the brain, or not a lot, but accumulating data out there about a particular area of the brain where it's in the hindbrain, and one of them is outside the blood-brain barrier and the other area is inside the blood-brain barrier. And there's data suggesting that these two areas are really important in mediating the weight loss effects of the GLP-1 agonists and the co-agonists, but they have different effects. And so today, Alice, and I'm going to butcher her last name, Adrinesis. She's in the UK, and she presented some very nice data showing that in one of those areas of the brain, you activate those GIP receptor neurons, you turn them on, and it actually increases food intake. And in the other area of the brain, it decreases food intake. So if that's true, it maybe speaks to some of these differences that we're seeing in terms of weight loss with both agonism and antagonism of the GIP receptor. So it's pretty cool.
That is fascinating, and that elucidating those underlying mechanisms, of course, eventually becomes so critically important clinically.
Yeah, and hopefully getting those understandings can also help alleviate some of the side effects we see from the drugs as well.
Yeah, great points. Kevin?
Yeah, so I'm kind of building on the foundation that Darlene just set there, and that a lot of my research interest is in how the brain is regulating peripheral metabolism, how it's regulating food intake and body weight regulation. And when you hear about a meeting such as the American Diabetes Association, there's probably many of y'all here know that those areas are covered, but the ones that are listening online that might not attend the meeting on a regular basis might be unaware that those topics are covered here. And the session that Darlene had kind of touched upon was on central regulation or central signaling factors that could be sensed in the brain, and what that might mean for metabolism. It could be regulating feeding behavior, body weight regulation, and also blood glucose control. And the session had multiple speakers. Started off with Quinn Shantong, Dennis Adezoy, Gina Leininger, and then it had Alice Andreessen was the final speaker. And so if you want to check that session out, I would recommend it. But they were using very fancy tools in order to dissect areas of the brain, not just limited to the hindbrain that Alice had focused on, but other areas, including the hypothalamus and areas outside of the hypothalamus, to see what they were doing in regulating motivated feeding behavior, homeostatic feeding behavior, what it means for diet-induced obesity. All of these studies were preclinical because of the tools that they were using and trying to make correlations to potential therapies and treatments that could be translatably relevant to humans. And another session related to how the brain is regulating metabolism is also focusing on cell types that are less appreciated or less talked about. And these are the non-neuronal cell types in the architecture of the brain. Some of these are considered to be support cell populations for neurons, but they're being shown to have a more active role in the regulation of metabolism, not just functioning totally as support, but they could be involved in the development of the brain. It could be involved in the maintenance of the brain, plasticity, all through life, and it can change in response to diet situations. And so it's really nice to see that the American Diabetes Association annual meeting is also focusing attention on how the brain is regulating these various aspects of metabolism, and potentially how these therapeutics, which, as Darlene mentioned, there's a huge interest in these incretins, monoincretins, dual incretins, triincretins, tertiary. What is it? Tertiary? Is that 4? What is 4? Getting up to as many as you can. Quad. Yeah. But and while these are very effective in patients, we know very little about how the mechanism of action is for these compounds, and it's a really hot area of investigation, trying to pinpoint these different areas in the brain that are beneficial, and potentially there could be some areas that would be counter-regulating those beneficial effects, maybe gating the response of these different compounds. And so it's really fascinating, and it's nice to see that emphasis here at the American Diabetes Association.
There really is, and I have to apologize ahead of time for saying this, but when you talked about triincretins, it just sounded like an ad. Triincretins.
I'm not being paid, so.
But
Not yet.
I do want to follow up on something you said in passing, and you said you might want to check it out. And for our listeners who didn't have the opportunity to come to the Sci sessions, you can actually still check it out. You can register for the online sessions. And I got to tell you, I know for myself, I don't know for you guys, when I get home over the next month, there are sessions I didn't see. That comes with our registration here. I'm going back online and clicking and watching the videos and seeing the slides, and to some degree feeling the excitement of being here, but at a time when I'm not actually here. And for those of you who really are interested, as you said, and check this one out, that opportunity is still available. Kirk?
Yeah, so I think that I'd like to highlight the Diabetes Journal's symposium, right? And I found it really interesting. There was a collection of talks addressing quality over quantity in weight loss, right? So we have these beautiful drugs now that induce really profound weight loss, and they've been game changers. But as was mentioned by Alice, there's the problem with lean mass loss that accompanies this, and so that was a topic of discussion that ran throughout the whole symposium. And speaking about bimagrumab, there was a specific talk by Paul Tichenor looking at the preclinical mechanistic effects of activin A modulators.
I did see Paul just sitting over there. Is he left now? Okay, he's left.
Yep. So I'll also highlight one additional talk, and there was a great talk by a friend and colleague, Ron Banerjee, at Johns Hopkins, and he uses pregnancy in mice to study islet and specifically beta cell plasticity. Right? So we know about the expansion of the beta cell during pregnancy, and then those beta cells have to be contracted again, and he's identified a role for some of these early response genes in that expansion and contraction. So that was a really cool study that is nice to see his follow-up work.
Kirk, I'm impressed, and then Darlene, I see you have something to say, but I'm just impressed listening as we're all pulling our information from different areas of knowledge. It goes back to what you said in the beginning, how much we learn from each other and these disparate sources. Darlene?
Oh, I was just going to say that nobody highlighted my talk, so whatever. Thanks.
But Neil hasn't gone yet. Maybe.
One of the best talks that
There's still hope.
You know, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to make.
Did you not give him the $20?
I'm going to make my comments short, and I'm going to actually say that for the talk that I'm going to choose actually goes to the theme that it's not always what we've done that brings the most joy, but it's the anticipation of the event that is sometimes the most exciting part of any event, and then the event itself, of course. So later today is the Catalyst trial being, the results of which will be given. Last year we saw the first part of the Catalyst trial that looked at the question of people with uncontrolled diabetes, and go to the article itself, which was published in Diabetes Care just a few months ago, to see the details of how they defined uncontrolled diabetes. But the point being, in people with uncontrolled diabetes, fully 24% of them were shown to have hypercortisolism as defined by a cortisol level, I think it was greater than 1.8 in a dexamethasone suppression test, suppression the night before with 1 milligram of dexamethasone. That is a game changer, but we don't want to integrate something into practice until we know that it makes a difference for people. And that's part 2 of the Catalyst trial later this afternoon, looking at, and we've seen the top line results reported, but I'm not going to tell you what they are, because I'm going to suggest you need to look up the trial, which I imagine will be published today. Certainly it's going to be presented today, because it is often the anticipation, which is what so much of this Sci Sessions is about. It's the excitement before we get here. It's when we get here, the excitement about the information coming out, as everyone went over, the epiphanies that we have when the information comes out. The other thing that I'm going to mention before we close is that our podcasts are a really wonderful, easy way to get information. And Alice, in your talk that Mike mentioned on SGLT2s, you quoted someone. And I actually was so struck by this quote that I wrote it down. And the person you quoted was your dad. And your dad said, and I try to do my best to write it down while you were talking, the easy way is not always the best way, but when it is the best way, you'd be a fool not to take it. And I think that says perfectly the reason why we love podcasts. It is a great and easy way to get information. I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank our guests who attended today for attending, and our panel for everyone's insights. Feel free to clap.
Thanks, Neil.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for coming, everyone. Really appreciate it.